It was the morning of June 14th, 2019, when Emily Harper and her 3-year-old son Noah were last seen. Emily, a nature-loving single mother from Boulder, Colorado, had decided to take a weekend getaway into the Rocky Mountains. She booked a small, rustic cabin at Eagle Ridge Lodge, an old but cozy place tucked deep into the forest, surrounded by towering pine trees and narrow dirt trails. Locals remembered her as kind, quiet, and polite. She arrived on a Friday evening, smiling and talking softly to her little boy, who clung to a stuffed elephant and pointed curiously at the towering peaks beyond the parking lot. The next morning, around 8 a.m., Emily checked out of the lodge's front desk, mentioning she planned to take a short hike on one of the nearby beginner trails. She packed lightly just a backpack, a child carrier for Noah, a water bottle, and a journal she was known to write in. Multiple guests recalled seeing her walking toward the forest trail, humming a tune and occasionally talking to Noah, who giggled and waved at birds. It seemed like any other weekend hike, a brief escape into the calmness of the wilderness, but by sunset, concern began to grow. Emily had not returned to the lodge. The front desk clerk, Mrs. Melville, waited until 9 p.m. before attempting to call her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. Assuming perhaps Emily had lost track of time or stayed with friends, the lodge gave it until morning. But when the sun rose and she still hadn't come back, a report was filed with the county sheriff. By noon the next day, search and rescue teams had arrived. Helicopters flew overhead, search dogs combed the trails, and volunteers fanned out in every direction. Emily's silver SUV was found still parked at the trailhead, locked, with no signs of damage or foul play. Inside the vehicle, officers found her purse, extra diapers, a baby blanket, and snacks items she would have surely taken on a long hike. Most unsettling of all was her phone, sitting in the glove box, powered off. With no digital trail, no text messages, and no GPS data to trace, authorities had little to go on. Near the edge of the trailhead, a volunteer noticed a child's sippy cup partially buried in the dirt, smeared with dried apple juice. Forensics later confirmed Noah's fingerprints on the cup, but it was the only physical clue found in the entire area. What puzzled search teams the most was the complete lack of tracks. The terrain was soft from recent rain, yet there were no distinct footprints, no signs of struggle, no dragged vegetation, no broken branches. The trail was well-traveled and clearly marked, and the area Emily chose was considered one of the safest in the region. How could a grown woman and a toddler simply walk into the woods ... and vanish without leaving a single trace? Within hours of Emily and Noah being reported missing, a full-scale search operation was launched. The Eagle County Search and Rescue team, well-trained in mountain recoveries, assembled at the trailhead that same afternoon. They began with the most likely paths, a series of looping, marked trails that led through forest clearings, alongside creeks, and up mild inclines. These were trails where families and tourists hiked every weekend, some even stroller-friendly. The idea that someone could get lost here, especially in broad daylight, seemed almost absurd to locals who knew the land. But the deeper the teams pushed into the wilderness, the more unsettling the silence became. By day 3, the search had grown in size and intensity. Helicopters with infrared sensors scanned the forest canopy, hoping to pick up body heat or movement. Mounted units patrolled deeper terrain. Canine units, trained in detecting both human scent and decomposition, were brought in from neighboring counties. They picked up a faint trail about a mile in, but it vanished near a moss-covered boulder, as if Emily and Noah had simply stopped existing. The dogs circled, whined, then lay down, confused. Rescue workers marked the spot, calling it the dead trail, because nothing past it ever turned up another lead. Meanwhile, Dozens of volunteers joined the effort. Hikers, climbers, and former military combed the area in grid patterns. They carried maps, radios, whistles. They shouted Emily and Noah's names until their voices cracked. Yet no one heard so much as an echo. Forest rangers confirmed there were no animal attacks reported, no aggressive wildlife sightings, and no natural hazards like unstable cliffs or sinkholes in the area. Even the weather had been cooperative, clear skies, no rain, no high winds. The conditions were ideal for hiking and for searching. But nothing helped Dot at one point. A ranger discovered what looked like a footprint mole, possibly belonging to a child. It was at the edge of a shallow creek, half washed away. Investigators couldn't confirm if it was Noah's, but nearby, they found what appeared to be a tuft of dark hair caught on a branch. DNA testing would later prove inconclusive. There was no blood, no signs of a fall, and no indication of anyone else in the area. Strangely, nearby ferns and grass appeared, undisturbed, as if no one had passed through it all. It was this almost surgical neatness to the scene that began to bother the search team's Dot. As the days passed, hope began to turn into dread. Media crews arrived and turned the missing persons case into a national story. Emily's sister, Claire, stood before flashing cameras, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. Tip lines lit up with supposed sightings and wild claims. Everything from a woman matching Emily's description boarding a bus, to whispers of her being taken by a doomsday cult. None of them led anywhere. And every night, as the sun dipped, behind the jagged mountains, a growing sense of unease settled over the camp. Something about the forest felt wrong, too still, too quiet, as if it was hiding something. Dot, as the weeks turned into months with no sign of Emily or Noah, speculation began to spiral in every direction. Without evidence, facts, or witness accounts, the story became fertile ground for theories, some logical, others disturbingly outlandish. Initially, law enforcement focused on the possibility of an accident. Perhaps Emily lost her footing, slipped into a ravine, or fell victim to exposure after taking a wrong turn. But extensive searches ruled that out. There were no cliffs in the area she was believed to have hiked, and her experience as a trail goer made it unlikely she'd veer off the main path. And even if she had, why were there no signs, no clothing, no broken branches, no sounds heard by anyone nearby? Then came the theory of a wild animal attack. Black bears, cougars, and even wolves were native to the Rockies. But wildlife experts were quick to point out something troubling. If it had been an animal, there would have been evidence: blood, clothing remnants, drag marks. Wild animals don't clean up after themselves. They leave a mess. But there was. Not a torn shoe, not a drop of blood, not a single footprint besides that one half-faded mark near the stream. It was as if Emily and her son had simply vanished into the air. Without a struggle or a cry for help. As pressure mounted on law enforcement, darker theories began to emerge. Online communities picked up the case, and within days, it became a trending topic on forums dedicated to true crime and unsolved mysteries. Some claimed it had to be a case of abduction, perhaps a serial offender operating in the woods. But there were no signs of forced entry into her vehicle, no tire tracks, or broken brush that suggested another person had been present. Nothing was stolen, and if someone had taken her, how had they managed to do so in broad daylight on a well-traveled path without being seen? Then came the whispers, quiet at first, then growing louder among locals who knew the land better than any detective. Some of the older residents, especially among the small native communities in the region, spoke of legends. Tales of the one who watches, a spirit said to dwell in the dense parts of the Rockies. Not evil, not good, just ancient. It was said to lure those who wandered too far off the path, especially those with a wandering heart or an unsettled soul. Elders claimed it rarely took children, but when it did, they were never found. At first, these stories were dismissed as folklore, but in the absence of hard facts, even the skeptics began to listen. As more time passed, hikers reported strange encounters in the region. Some said they felt watched. Others claimed they heard a child crying in the woods, only to follow the sound and find nothing but silence. One couple, hiking weeks after the disappearance, told authorities they saw a barefoot woman standing among the trees at dusk, her clothes white, her head tilted, unmoving. They thought it was a prank or a ghost story meant to scare tourists. Until they learned about Emily. Investigators followed up, but the woman had vanished. No footprints. No sign anyone had ever been there. Just trees. And the growing belief that something in those woods didn't want to be found. Nearly a year after Emily and Noah's disappearance, when the case had all but faded from headlines, an unexpected discovery reignited public interest and deepened the mystery. A wildlife biologist named Dr. Raymond Epps had been conducting a study on nocturnal migration patterns of elk deep within the forest, roughly 20 miles from the original trailhead where Emily's car was found. As part of the research, he had installed dozens of motion-activated cameras in remote areas, places few hikers ever reached. Most of the footage was mundane: raccoons, owls, the occasional fox. But on one camera, footage from a foggy night in early June 2020 revealed something chilling. At precisely 2:39 a.m., the camera picked up movement. A faint human figure emerged from the tree line barefoot, slow-moving and seemingly dazed. As the mist curled around the lens, the figure became clearer. It was a woman, carrying something close to her chest. The footage was grainy, and the infrared lighting distorted some details, but Dr. Epps immediately sensed something was off. The figure was thin, pale, and walked as if in a trance. When he enhanced the frame, it looked like she was clutching a small child wrapped in something like a blanket or oversized hoodie. The child's head rested on her shoulder. UNMOVING. Dr. Epps reported the footage to local authorities. Investigators, skeptical at first, reviewed the tape and were stunned by the resemblance. Though blurry, the woman's posture, body frame, and facial structure bore a striking similarity to Emily Harper. The way she carried the child, the way she occasionally looked over her shoulder as if sensing something following her. It was uncanny. Rangers and deputies were immediately dispatched to the location where the footage was recorded. They combed the area for hours, retracing the woman's path with GPS markers and thermal scopes. But nothing was found: no footprints, no fabric, no signs of recent human activity. Just a few feet from where the woman had been captured on film, a park ranger named Dylan Rourke noticed something odd: 5 long, deep gouges scratched into the bark of an old pine tree. The marks started 8 feet up and raked downward in a jagged pattern, like something massive had reached down with unnatural force. The team initially believed it could have been from a bear until closer inspection revealed something bizarre. The spacing between the marks was too wide for claws. It looked more like fingers, human-sized fingers. But no animal known to roam that part of the Rockies had hands like that. Photos were taken, and the team moved on uneasy, but with no proof of what made the marks. When the footage was released to the public, theories exploded online. Some believed it was a hoax, a look-alike planted for attention. Others were convinced it proved Emily was alive and possibly hiding. But among the more superstitious, the tape was seen as something far darker. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed something easily missed at first glance. In one of the final seconds before the woman disappears into the fog, a faint silhouette appears several feet behind her, tall, thin, nearly blending into the trees. A shape with no clear outline, just there, like a shadow that wasn't supposed to be. Some viewers called it pareidolia. Others said it was the watcher the locals warned about. But whatever it was, one thing became chillingly clear. If that really was Emily Harper on the footage, she wasn't a lone dot in the months following the release of the forest camera footage. Something shifted in the surrounding towns. The official investigation remained quiet, but the local atmosphere grew heavier, more cautious. For years, the people who lived near Eagle Ridge and the surrounding trail systems had whispered among themselves about strange occurrences, odd sounds, missing pets, and the feeling of being watched while hiking alone. But now, with tangible evidence of something or someone moving through those woods late at night, the old stories came flooding back. What had once been dismissed as folklore suddenly felt very real and very close. Older residents began speaking openly about a presence they had long kept quiet about. Many referred to it only by a nickname, the Watcher in the Pines. The stories were always vague, always different, but they shared a theme. The Watcher didn't kill or hunt in the traditional sense. It lured, it waited. It made people feel safe enough to wander, then they simply weren't seen again. Some believed it was the spirit of an ancient guardian, disturbed by outsiders. Others thought it was a forest entity, neither human nor animal, something that fed not on flesh, but on memory and time. It didn't take bodies. It took people out of reality, as if plucking them from one world and placing them into another. Just beyond the trees, one woman, Lila Monroe, a retired forest guide, came forward during a town meeting held in August 2020. Her hands trembled as she recounted an experience from 1987 when, as a teenager, she had gotten lost for 3 days in the same woods. She described hearing a baby crying every night, soft at first, then louder when she tried to sleep. On the third night, she claimed she saw a woman standing across the riverbank, soaked and barefoot, staring straight at her with hollow eyes. When she was rescued, she had scratches down her arms she couldn't explain and told rangers she'd followed the wrong voice. Her story was dismissed at the time as stress-induced hallucination. But now, people were listening. Others began sharing accounts as well. A park ranger reported hearing children laughing in the trees long after sundown, despite no families being registered to hike that week. A hunter said he saw a woman in white gliding through a foggy valley at dusk. He raised his binoculars and saw that she was holding something, but when he blinked, she was gone. Even skeptics began avoiding that part of the forest, particularly a region the locals had nicknamed the Still Zone, a stretch of trail where birds didn't sing, leaves didn't rustle, and time itself seemed to slow. People reported watches stopping, phone batteries draining instantly, and an overwhelming urge to turn back. Despite all the stories, no physical evidence ever surfaced to explain the growing dread that hung over Eagle Ridge. The forest was still just the forest trees, dirt, wind, and shadows. But anyone who lived near it began locking their doors earlier. Parents kept their kids away from the trails. Tourists noticed missing person posters stapled to trail signs, Emily and Noah's faces slowly fading in the sun and rain. Yet even as the case went cold, one thing remained constant, the sense that the forest had changed. It wasn't just a place to hike anymore. It was a place that remembered who had gone missing and might still be keeping them. 6 years after Emily and Noah vanished, the case had become a grim legend, more myth than memory. Most assumed they had perished in the woods, their remains claimed by the elements. But in the spring of 2025, everything changed. A seasoned hunter named Jacob Marsh was tracking elk off a seasonal path in a restricted section of the forest, far beyond where any official search had reached. It was a place even locals avoided, thick with undergrowth and strangely silent. Jacob had hunted in the Rockies his entire life, But that day, he felt something unfamiliar, disoriented, almost like the forest was folding in on itself. That's when he saw it, a structure tucked behind a wall of brambles, barely visible through the trees, that wasn't on any ranger maps or satellite scans. The building was small and decayed, more a shack than a proper cabin. The wood was warped from years of exposure, the roof caved in partially, and the door hung open on rusted hinges. Jacob approached cautiously, expecting an abandoned ranger station or forgotten hunting post. But what he found inside froze him in place. The air was heavy, damp, filled with the scent of mold and something else, something metallic. Old newspapers were scattered on the floor, but amidst the debris lay a child's drawing, freshly made, on crisp white paper. It showed a mountain, a black figure with long arms, and a woman with a small child. Dot in the far corner of the room was a child's jacket, small enough for a toddler. Beside it, under a collapsed wooden beam, lay a torn, dirt-stained adult coat. Both were later confirmed through DNA testing to belong to Emily and Noah, but what terrified investigators more than the items themselves was how out of place they felt, like someone had staged the scene but didn't understand how time worked. There was no dust on the drawing. The ink was smudge-free. A forensic analyst later testified that the paper had been placed there within hours of discovery, but Jacob had been the only human confirmed in the area for weeks. Then came the writing, etched violently into the wooden walls, over and over, almost in a frenzy. One phrase repeated hundreds of times: "He won't let you leave." The letters were jagged, desperate, some cut so deep they splintered the wood. It was clear that whoever wrote it had done so with intense fear or mania. More disturbing still, the phrase was carved in two distinct heights, suggesting that both an adult and a child may have inscribed the message. One section, scrawled in crayon between the carved words, simply read, "Mommy said don't listen to the tall man." Photos of the cabin quickly leaked online, sparking a media frenzy and reigniting public obsession with the Harper case. Yet, despite the terrifying implications, no further evidence could be gathered. Motion-triggered cameras placed around the site picked up nothing but static. Drones flown overhead often lost signal when approaching the area. Even experienced rangers who tried to revisit the cabin claimed they couldn't find it again, despite having GPS coordinates. It was as if the forest had swallowed the place whole, or, as some quietly began to suggest, it only revealed itself when it wanted to be found. Since the cabin's discovery in early 2025, something strange has gripped the entire Eagle Ridge region, a quiet dread that hangs in the air like mist after rain. Though law enforcement officially closed the case again, citing inconclusive evidence, the locals knew better. Something had changed. It wasn't just the unease or the surge in hikers going missing in the surrounding area. It was the forest itself. Rangers began reporting increased animal migrations away from the inner woods. Birds that once nested in the tall pines abandoned their territories. Campers complained of unbearable silence at night, broken only by the occasional sound of distant, unplaceable footsteps crunching leaves in the dark. Within a month of the cabin footage leaking online, nearby residents started calling in strange reports. Several people claimed to have seen a barefoot woman with tangled hair walking along the tree line at dusk, holding what appeared to be a bundled-up child. Always silent, always still. When approached, she would vanish into the trees, without a sound. A group of hikers swore they saw her watching them from a ridge 20 feet above the trail, yet when they climbed up, there was no trace of her, no footprints. Just a faint sweet scent in the air, like baby powder mixed with something rotting beneath it. Local authorities dismissed these sightings as misinterpretations, but their private memos told another story. Several rangers requested transfers away from Eagle Ridge, citing growing unease, nightmares, and what one called a presence that follows you out of the woods. Surveillance equipment set up around the old cabin site repeatedly malfunctioned, recording only static or unintelligible whispering when played back. A seasoned ranger named Vaughn reported hearing a lullaby echoing through the trees late one night, the same lullaby Emily's sister claimed Emily used to sing to Noah when he couldn't sleep. Meanwhile, families passing through the area for hiking or camping began experiencing brief moments of confusion or lost time. One woman claimed she walked for 5 minutes down a trail with her son, only to turn around and realize over an hour had passed and her son was quietly sobbing, saying, "The tall man told me not to talk." Another camper woke up to find their belongings rearranged into a circle around their tent, with a child's footprint pressed into the dirt just inches from their pillow. No other tracks were found. Those who dared to camp overnight often reported the same recurring sound. A child crying softly, growing louder, then abruptly stopping just before dawn. Today, locals refuse to hike near the trailhead where Emily's car was found. The lodge she stayed in has been permanently closed, the property owner refusing to comment. Rangers have unofficially renamed a section of the forest the Hollow, and though it doesn't appear on maps, every seasoned outdoorsman knows. Where it begins, where the air turns colder, where the trees seem to lean inward, and where silence doesn't feel peaceful, it feels like a warning. The Harper case may have faded from news cycles, but in the quiet mountain towns that border Eagle Ridge, one truth remains: the forest never gave them back. It simply holds them. Somewhere, just out of sight, background music, slow ambient hum with faint wind sounds, visual, fading images of the forest, old drawings, and missing posters. Narrator, calm, chilling tone. And so the story of Emily Harper and little Noah ends not with answers, but with silence. No arrests, no confessions, no confirmed sightings that led to their return, just echoes in the forest, a cabin that vanishes when sought, and a mother's voice, some say, still singing to her child in the dead of night. Maybe they're still out there, lost in time, hidden behind the veil of something we weren't meant to understand. Or maybe the forest doesn't lose people. It keeps them. So if you ever find yourself in the Rockies and you hear soft footsteps behind you, or a lullaby drifting through the pines, don't follow it. Don't look back, because some trails should never be walked twice. Music swells slightly, then fades to silence, visual, black screen. Then in bold white letters, they vanished once. The forest never forgot,